Throughout the lifetime of former band turned solo act Panic at the Disco, there have been hits and misses like any other band. But the recent releases make their discography look more like the Voltron viewer ratings graph. When considering the latest album release, it's important to consider where we've come from and where we are now. While the vocal downgrades are obvious and noteworthy, it's also worth noting the decrease in lyrical prowess and production. Gone are the days of Ryan Ross's confessional missives and panache. Now all we are left with is hollow production, strained vocal cords, and rambling lyrics. How did we get here? What went wrong? And why are some people so desperate to delude themselves into believing everything is the same? Panic at the Disco was founded by Ryan Ross and signed to Decay Dance Records after some playful online negging aimed at Fall Out Boy's Pete Wentz. It is Ross's presence that makes the first two albums what they are: the panache, the drama, the earnest, the shimmering vocabulary, the misdirection, all of it. Though initially intended as the main vocalist, Ryan took a backseat when Brendan Urie was introduced. Brendan Urie is a man that has mastered humanity's oldest instrument, his voice, and he can play it well. Though his early vocals lack practice and experience, it is immediately recognizable that the man has talent. He can belt, and his voice hits the notes with the clarity many lack. Many might not recognize his just barely post-pubescent voice from their early hit I Write Sins Not Tragedies, a certified emo classic. It's on their first album, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, where everyone is operating at near maximum capacity. Ross's lyrics convey honesty in the first half and fantasy in the second. He and Spencer Smith curate captivating compositions, and Yuri's vocals are impressive. But again, I need to emphasize Ross's importance. It is his mind that drives the album, that creates the concept and the costumes for this first tour, and then he does it all again on Pretty Odd, before departing from the band due to creative and personal differences, taking bassist John Walker with him. The band has changed compositions so many times that to tour with the original name would be a misnomer. It's the Ship of Theseus, barely recognizable as the original if not for the name. Each era's songwriting can be distinctly separated by the writer's influences, from the first era's heartache and SAT-worthy vocabulary, to the second era's wistful romanticism, and lastly to the third era's confidence. Ryan Ross, Pete Wentz, and Dallin Weeks, member through albums 3 and 4, all deserve credit for the majority of eras 1 and 2. Era 3, the solo Brendan era, is particularly interesting to me. The Death of a Bachelor album showed very much promise, and yet it couldn't live up to it. It is on this album that we receive the strikingly astute lyric, "You're just like Mike Love, but you want to be Brian Wilson," a reference to the Beach Boys lead singer that wanted credit for the songwriter's chops. Perhaps this is a real criticism that Urie received, and perhaps this was his own conscious talking. During Death of a Bachelor, Urie's writing follows his excitement of being married, making him feel untouchable and on top of the world. The album's genre, while still mainly pop rock, dips its toes into jazz and lends itself to the grandiose attitude that was once characteristic of the older days. The 36-minute runtime is fueled by boldness bordering on recklessness, with cheeky lyrics and powerful vocals to back. Urie's range has some especially standout moments in the titular song. The Death of a Bachelor era was promising. It was noticeably better than that before it, and even introduced a new wave of fans. The next album, Pray for the Wicked, was a letdown. Shallow lyrics, hollow production, and worst of all, a catchiness that would plague corporate playlists for the foreseeable future. Brendan Urie's vocals had clearly benefited from Broadway training, sounding clear, and the tracks were interesting and passable to listen to, but the songs were obviously missing something. The lyrics held little to no substance and at times even felt rambling and unrefined. When holding up this album next to the last, this one sounded predictable and clearly manufactured. Many non-fans even felt as though their corporate jobs were holding them hostage with their incessant replaying of the single High Hopes. After the excitement of the previous album, many fans were disappointed when their pre-ordered special edition vinyls came in the mail, only to house 34 minutes of fluff. But nobody could have been prepared for what came next. Viva Las Vengeance's initial snippets posted to Twitter were met with harsh criticism. All of the songs blended together, the lyrics were weak and hateful, and Yuri's voice was strained beyond recognition. Surely the whole album wouldn't be like this, right? It gets worse. The vengeance in the title is hardly a misnomer. Most of the lyrics serve either as a diss track to the former members, Ross and Weeks specifically, or as a B-side to an old stand-up comic's I Hate My Wife routine. The production tries to mimic an 80s style band, often attempting to emulate Queen, but comes off more like disjointed patchwork and gives the listener a bit of whiplash at times. The verses and the choruses of certain songs have such wildly different tempos that they struggle to keep up with each other. And worst of all, Urie's vocals have gone to shit. After years of trying to prove he can hit every last note, he sounds as if he's taken a cheese grater to the throat. His vocal range is no longer as impressive and well-rounded, but instead sounds strained and abused. When stretching the octave to his peak, he loses the bass in his voice, leaving the track to sound hollow. The wavelengths are literally shorter and do not carry as far. It's sad to see how far he's fallen, especially since his claim to fame was always being the guy with the voice. Touring isn't going well either. Videos of dead crowds and unfortunately missed notes are going viral on TikTok. These fans, loyal to a fault, can no longer delude themselves into having a good time. It's painful to watch. And to put the icing on the cake, the album was released after controversy. If footage of Urie's casually racist remarks and flippant use of the N-word wasn't enough, allegations of sexual harassment had been levied against security guard Zach Hall, a close friend of Urie's. Brennan's response to the controversy? Radio silence. It's safe to say that he hadn't given fans much to be happy about. Going from Brennan's juvenile yet promising vocals on Fever to his vocals on Bachelor, good, clear, strong, to Pray for the Wicked, Broadway, and not as rich, but still clear, to Vengeance, completely strained and stripped raw, is disappointing to say the least. Some of the worst music comes from those that you expected more from. Naturally, there's always room for improvement, and I want more than anything for a miraculous turnaround. But it may be time to put this rabid dog down.